I think it is. You know, when the service is over, I want to be happy, I want to have fun. So I go out that door and maybe I start thinking about getting some coffee, or maybe just go sit in the sun or go to the lake or read. And yet, what is the reality of that? Is that is that order going to last very long? Is that peace? Is that joy? Is it going to be continuous? You know it won't. One of the challenges is that we live in a reality, but it's not really, it's only a partial reality. And before I've mentioned that the Buddhist referred to this particular reality as a relative one, not an absolute one. But we go out into that and it's in constant change. No matter how hard we work to create peace, to create safety, to create just, a place to relax, things are always changing around us. And even the structure of this particular reality, the molecules, the atoms, they're in constant movement. They're never sitting static. So we live in a reality that is in constant motion. So the power, to me, one of the most important parts of unity, and one that I appreciate that we have, as I've said many times, is this one candle, this symbol of who we are, that there is only one, despite the appearances. And this is what it means, I think, to become a living prayer. It's the work of remembering and opening to the truth of who we all are, the truth of every being on this planet, that we are the one. If you had a picture, a holographic picture, and if I was to cut that picture in half, all of a sudden each half would have exactly the same image. And if I cut it in half again, each of those pieces, I would now have 4 pieces, each with the original image. Now, I could be cutting that like they do in math, into infinity or approaching infinity, but never reaching an infinity. I could cut that image. So let's make that image God. And no matter how many times we cut it, there's always the one image. When Jesus said the Father and I are one, it's because that image is in every one of us. It's the truth of who we are. I mean, it's not an exact thing, but we are a part of that oneness. We talk about that in all our focuses this morning. Now, the chaplains, one of their responsibility is to work so that they can know and hold what we call spiritual space. So no matter what you share with us, that our hearts can know, our hearts as best we can be in that place that know there's more to you than what you're sharing, that all that is held, not in fear, not in separation, but in the oneness of love and the wholeness of who we are. In the Course in Miracles, I believe, it said that it defined temptation as persuading the child of God that it's a body. This is where the illusion starts. That body is actually just a symbol of the belief, not the reality, but a belief that we are separate. And out of that comes separation from everything. Separation from ourself. So most of us are in constant pain in one way or another, never quite enough. Always having to do a little bit more so that we can be okay, so that we can be love. When the war in Ukraine first started, I'd say probably almost every person that I'm a chaplain with brought up the war in Ukraine and wanted to hold it in prayer. And I was really touched and amazed at the kindness and the sweetness and the love that is the truth of all of you. I mean, you weren't thinking about yourselves. You were worried about the suffering of all these people. And it was very interesting for me because of what we've talked about so far this morning, about that image of God. You know, one of our basic principles is that we say that that divinity is not only in us, but it's in each of us. And it's also in every living being, whether it be this planet or another planet, it doesn't really matter. So when it came time to, when people are asking me to hold prayer, it was very interesting to open myself up and to hold every single being involved in that conflict, even the ones that were the perpetrators, to hold each of them in a deeper truth, that no matter what the role was that they were playing in this lifetime, their truth was that that spirit was in them, that they were not ever, they've never been separate from that oneness of God. Now, they may not know it. They may have gone through a lot of suffering. They're carrying obviously a lot of fear to feel that they need to kill another being in order to be safe. But we all have to struggle with that. We all have to work with that. Just the nature of being in a body makes us feel like each other is a threat at some level. Whether you might have something that I want, or maybe, yeah, maybe you are what I would like to be. Maybe you're smart or you're beautiful or whatever it happens to be. It sets us up. And also by being separate, we constantly are feeling separate from what we need, from everything. So this is why we come here. We come into the sanctuary of our beingness. And people sometimes wonder, well, how is it that we can find that inside? I find myself constantly being kind of taken back into old experiences. And what's happening is I've been taken deeper and deeper each time. So sometimes I'll share things with you, and then maybe a year or two later or whatever, or 10 years later, I'll share it again. And the ego doesn't want to change. So watch that mind and go, oh, I know that. And then it just shuts down. We really have to deal with that when we listen to each other or to anything. And so I've shared a couple of times over in the last 30 years or so that we've been doing this, that there was a moment about 4 days before I was to take off for India for the first time, when I found myself 15 feet in the air, upside down, with cement down below me. And I thought, oh my God, I'm dead. And obviously I wasn't. But I want to share a little more of that experience. I shared with you that in that experience, as I was laying there, all fear was lifted from me. All fear was taken away. And what was there was this amazing joy. Now I'm bleeding. You know, I ended up eventually getting 110 stitches on my head. There was all kinds of things, but I was in this state of joy. And what that taught me is that's who we are. It's not an emotion. It's not something that we create maybe at the football game, which was great, wasn't it? But, and the people were in, you know, the people were showing their joy. I was too. I was screaming at home. But this is not that kind of a joy. This is a joy that's down at the core of who we are. But here's the other thing I want to share. Along with that, I was flooded. Everything I saw was flooded with light. Now, it was the same world. It was the same world that hadn't changed. But all of a sudden, what I was resonating with was not something that was different than me. It was like it was a shared love and in this light that was enfolding all of us. And it really did not matter whatsoever about my world or what was happening or where I was going to go in 4 days. None of that mattered. And when I was in the doctor's office, it was fascinating observing how I didn't say anything. I didn't tell anybody what was going on, but I could see that whole office transforming. And they were looking at each other wondering, what is going on? They could feel it. They could tell something very, very different was happening to them. And that's who you and I are. The block to that is the fear. And I'll touch upon that in a minute. That fear is what keeps us from ourselves. And why? Why is the core joy? Why is that core of us light? It's because who we are. I told you that in India one time, the mystic real quietly said, the core of you is love. Now, he didn't shout it out. He didn't underline it. You know, maybe a lot of people never heard it. But that said a lot, that that's who we are. And so when that fear was lifted, and I wasn't the one that did that. I mean, I just got to experience it. That's what was there, the core of who you and I are. So we always have, in the Course in Miracles, they say we have two choices, don't they? They say you have a choice of love or you have the choice of fear. You have the choice of spirit, which is who you are. That's what makes the spirit of who we are is what is one. The spirit of God is why we're one and we are apart and never been separate from that. That's who you and I are. But the fear, or maybe thinking we're a body, causes us to go into a place that's not the truth. The mystic Rumi, who was, I believe, a Sufi mystic, wrote that your task is not to seek love. Why is that? Because you already there. It's already in you. All we have to do is stop and be still. We have to have some way to go, okay, how do I turn this anxiety? How do I turn this fear? How do I turn that over? How do I start to become a living prayer of attuning myself to the sacredness of who I am? Merely seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against love. So that's what I have to keep my eye open for, is what am I feeling right now? You know, am I feeling love or am I feeling something else? That something else is going to be part of the ego. Anything that's not love is going to be some part of that separation. I can't tell when I'm in my ego. I mean, I can sometimes, but there's a lot of times it's so subtle. I have no idea, but I can tell when I'm feeling love. So, so I'm bored. So I feel empty. So I don't feel good enough with you. Is that love? No. And so I can make a choice. That's what's important, is making the choice. Really, the most difficult part is being mindful of what is going on inside of me. Now, the choice is that I'm already connected to love. And so I can open to that. I can open to the wholeness of spirit of who I am. And I'll read something here that'll talk about this a little bit more. You open to, say, to something that helps you vibrate with your truth, like the prayer of protection. But basically, I find myself turning to that oneness in whatever form that's comfortable with to me. It doesn't matter. Basically, it's going outside the ecosystem. If you think of the ego as just being a circle, a reality of its own, an entity that's only a relative entity. Like the Buddhists say, it's only a relative reality. And going outside of that, reach outside, speak outside, and say, help me. Help me to see myself differently. Help me to see this experience differently. Help me not to feel agitated when I don't know the answer, etc., etc. One of the things I use as a chaplain, it comes from the Song of Prayer. It comes through the Course in Miracles. But it says, as I'm preparing myself and allowing myself to feel our truth, one of the things it says here that that you who are in time for just a little while, you only have one need. Realize that what God created is one. That all these illusions of separation are one in the mind of God. And we are a part of that mind. We are one in that mind. And so our choices between that mind or that mind that thinks you and I are not enough. That's what we're constantly working with. But there was another thing it came out of a workbook in the course that it said, fear is a stranger here. That was part of the title. I am at home. And the reason why fear is a stranger is because it's not anything other than the oneness is not real. It's only relative. You have to work with it. But it's not this craziness is not being created by God. You remember our thoughts are constantly creating by what we think, what we feel, and what we believe. So what are my thoughts in this moment? That's what I'm working with. So let me just read this and think about the prayer protection also as I do this in a little bit. Fear and grief are your guests. They go with you and abide with you on the way. But the dark journey is not the way of God's child. It doesn't have to be that way. Walk in light. Do not see the dark companions. And that's what we're doing with prayer. We're taking our attention off those dark companions and remembering, feeling, coming in, opening to the truth. We don't have to go find anything. It's already here within us. We just have to be willing to move from that reality of chaos and come into the quiet of who you are and to the truth and the power. Listen to this here. They are not fit companions for you. You are created of light and in light. The light of God surrounds me. The love of God enfolds me. The great light always surrounds you and shines out from you. How can you see the dark companions in light such as this? So when all of a sudden that fear was lifted to me, no matter what was going on, no matter whether I was going to live or die, there was only the light. There was only the love. There was only the joy. That's who we are. And that's what we're here to support and to remind and comfort. And that's why we forgive. Because that's the truth of every soul on this planet. If I took a drop from the sea, that little drop would be so vulnerable. What if I dropped it? It can evaporate. Basically, it's under threat of dying. But if I took that drop and I put it back into the sea, that drop, which is vulnerable and which is nothing and insignificant, now becomes the sea. That's who you are. That's where your power is. That fear is just an illusion. It's so tiny that when you let go of holding on, when I let go of holding on to this thing that I think is Michael, there's an opportunity to place him into the sea, the oneness of who we are. For we are love and we are loved, and we give thanks. Thank you. So let's take a moment and just maybe feel some of this. Take a moment to feel the incredible truth of who you are and we are. So just gently take a breath as a way to just let go of those unconscious tensions that are always there just from being alive, being under gravity, being in a body, having to deal with so many things in this world. Just gently breathe. And relax into the truth of who we are. No matter what the appearances are to our senses, you are the light. You are the love. You are the joy. You are the peace. There is only one child, and you are that child. We're here supporting and loving and forgiving each other so that we can know that in truth, each of us is the Christ, the child of oneness, the child of love. We're all here as a living prayer. As a spark, as a drop of that oneness, as the love. We are constantly being drawn to the oneness of who we are, the oneness and the love that enfolds all of creation, that is eternal, that is infinite. And we allow in this moment to relax into the oneness of every being in this room. Allow the love of every soul in this room to love you. Know that every soul here is forgiving us so that we can forgive ourselves. No being at any moment has ever been separate from that oneness, from that wholeness of who we are, of love, that infinite love. You are God's light. You are God's peace. You are God's joy. and we give thanks that we love and support each other in this journey of love. Amen. Good job. Kathy just had a knee replacement a couple of weeks ago, so she's doing really quite amazing. And thank you, Kathy, for being here and doing this. So let's do the prayer protection, and let's allow ourselves to feel it as we say it. Because I think you could see that this prayer is the truth about what is going on all the time. So together, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. Power of God protects us. Presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And if you're comfortable, you may stand